Welcome to The Grow Show, where we make it easier for entrepreneurs and leaders to grow their businesses. You'll hear from real leaders with real stories about their successes and failures so you don't have to make the same mistakes. We won't break out textbooks or talk theory, only raw stories from the front lines with actionable takeaways.
The Grow Show is sponsored by Heil Sound, world-class microphones for stage, studio, broadcast, and podcast. Find your sound at heilsound.com. And by Reggie. Are your outbound sales campaigns not driving the engagement you're looking for? Revenue leaders rely on Reggie.ai to write high-performing sales copy that cuts through the noise and books more meetings. Want to see how it works? Head over to Reggie.ai/GrowShow and learn how to put the power of best practices in AI into the hands of your sales team. Here's the next episode of The Grow Show.
All right. Welcome back to episode 2 of The Grow Show. Before we get started, Scott, Jeff, how'd you feel about episode 1? Little introductions, warm and fuzzies.
After paying you guys off for saying nice things to me, I feel poor, but yeah, it was a good start, I think.
I think we're off and running. My wife has no idea who you were talking about when you introduced me, right. But other than that, I think we're in a good spot.
Well, we're excited about it, and we're excited to actually get into some content for this episode. And, these are stories from the front line. So the whole goal of this is not in the textbooks, not in theory. This is in practice, real life sales, business, consulting that's going to help you and your company. So the first topic today, something we're all very passionate about, we felt like it would be necessary to start here, is a predictable sales pipeline. It's what we do for a living. It's what I've been living in for 9 years. Scott, it's why you started Abstract and what you did before. Jeff, Sapper Consulting, the same deal. So why don't we start with Scott, from your standpoint, what does a predictable sales pipeline mean and why is it so important?
In its easiest form, it's, a predictable number of new sales meetings on a weekly, monthly basis, right? But when I think about it, there's a lot that goes into it. It's really knowing your own business development formula. It's like, what do I sell? How much does it cost? How many people do I have selling? What's my client base look like? What's my retention rate look like? And really, in order to know that you are growing, going forward, or even staying at the same level, you need to know, how long a client lasts, or if you're going on sales calls, how many it's going to take to sell a client. What's that revenue look like? It's really a math formula. And if someone wants to grow by $1 million and they, have their clients are $20,000 each, well, that's a lot of clients. So, then they're going to have to look at how many new sales meetings that they go on and what their close rate is. And if they close it at a 10% rate and want to grow by $1 million and their clients are only $20,000, then is that possible, right? What do I have to have going on to make sure that I get there? There's a lot of people that say, I want to grow. And in the first couple of years, they probably do organically by putting the shingle up, selling their friends and family, getting some referrals. Then all of a sudden that becomes less predictable. And then they get into this zone of, oh my God, now I'm up, I'm running, I've got a couple of employees. What do I do next? They're worried about those employees, feeding them, meeting payroll, and then growing the business. And a lot of people don't have it clearly defined. Like, I want this exact amount of revenue next year that equates to this much growth. Here's what my clients are worth. Here's when I lose clients. Here's my close rate. And here's the exact number of new sales meetings that I need in order to get to my goal. A lot of times owners are the salespeople. If it's a roofing company, maybe they're on the roof. When the hell are they doing the activity necessary to build the pipeline? Or maybe I now have a salesperson or two, or even if you have an entire sales organization, salespeople, it's the last thing in the world that they want to do. Like, we spend $1.8 million here and generating leads for our salespeople because they don't want to generate their own leads, right?
No.
And even if they're good at it, maybe they're in the sales process on a sales pitch, and when they're doing that, they're not, generating that pipeline. So it's almost impossible to do it on your own, and in fact, I would say it is impossible unless you're in the business. It takes a ton of people, which we're going to talk about, a ton of different types of individuals, lots of process to get there. Honestly, the only way that I would ever feel good about owning a business is knowing that I had consistent sales meetings so that if I lose a client, I know how I'm going to replace them so my people are safe. Or if I want to grow, I know that I'm actually going to grow and how I'm going to get there. To me, it's everything. Everything else, if there's business coming through the door and if you're growing, everything else you can solve.
Absolutely.
But you can't if the business doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, and you touched on it there for a second, but I bet there's people out there listening right now that could go through, could have some risk. If you own a business, you got some risk. We were talking earlier off the mics about some times when things weren't going so good, like where we got in a tough spot, where maybe somebody had too much on their Amex, or maybe we were going to have $1 million on the Amex.
That was last company.
Yeah, like somebody had to call their family members because they weren't going to be able to meet payroll on Wednesday, on Sunday. Now those things worked out for us, but they don't work out for everybody. And the moment you start getting customers is the moment you start being at risk of losing customers. Yeah. And you want to talk about a way for business owners and entrepreneurs to keep themselves out of a tough spot. The number one piece of advice I can give is make sure those customers keep coming in. And make sure you got the predictable sales pipeline for the safety and continuity of your business, for your people, for your family. Like this is real stuff for people at a lot of stages of business. And I can't, and I think everybody sitting around this table would agree, I cannot possibly say it strongly enough. Predictable sales pipeline is the antidote for business risk.
I like that. And when I guess when you look at growing your business, and it started with the Aaron Ross, Predictable Revenue, who ran and led Salesforce, and a lot of people kind of subscribe to that thinking. He talked about seeds, nets, and spears. And so when you look at that, that's your referrals, that's your inbound leads coming to you, and then spears, that's your outbound leads that you're going to get. And we've talked about this, right? You start your business, you hang the shingle, you just mentioned it. The easiest thing to do is go get referrals, friends and family, maybe connections from the industry you left from. And that's great. Lowest cost of sale. Like everybody wants a referral. We'll take as many as we can possibly get. And then that gets to a point where you have so much business, you got to hire that first employee. And when you hire that first employee, all of a sudden you find out, wait, I'm not making as much money as I was before I hired this person. So then what do you have to do? You have to go find more business. And that problem never stops. Starts at 2 people, is still there at 2 million people. So from there, logically, I feel like a lot of people go to the nets, the inbound leads, the Google AdWords, the PPC, the website, the social, because it's a really close extension of referrals, right? It's somebody coming to you. There's typically a problem or pain, and it's an easier sale. Ultimately, that's good, but you still can't control that revenue fully. And if you can't fully control it, you're not going to have predictability. So what people find is they get into that last bucket, and to truly predict your sales, you need the outbound approach. And that's tough. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of time and energy to be able to do it. And I thought it'd be relevant for this. Not that we're the model that every company should go off of, but in 2021, we did 2.5 million in MRR, monthly recurring revenue. It's a lot of business, right? We sold a lot of business. And the way it broke down is we had 18% from referrals from our clients. We had 24% from inbound, so leads coming to us. And we have a web development team and content. We're getting better and better. I actually expect that number to go up. But 57% of our revenue came from outbound. And that's me grouping email into inbound. And you could argue that's outbound as well, right? When businesses say, you know, hey, I'm doing well in sales, you know, we're primarily just growing from referrals and marketing and inbound leads. They very well may be closing a lot of business, but I look at it as like, you're missing out on double the revenue, right? If you had a good outbound approach, but it's tough, right? A lot of people don't do it. Scott, why do you feel like people hesitate to kind of make that move into committing to an outbound approach?
That's a good question. First of all, in a comment did you say $2 million in recurring revenue?
2.5 million.
So just so people realize the extent of it, that's the monthly fee, right? But it's really 12 times that.
30 million, right? Am I doing my math? Somebody check me, right? Yeah.
That's the, you know, if we sell a couple $100,000 a month. So we have to have a significant pipeline in place to add the 50, 60 new clients a month net to get to that. Like, we just don't get there without a predictable sales pipeline. We're doing it at a big level. Are you asking why people don't think enough about the predictable sales pipeline, or why that?
Yeah, I think when I started into account management, you know, and I'd be talking to our clients, you know, the first thing, I was surprised of how many don't actually have a sales goal. They know they want to grow, but they don't have like a specific goal. And then almost none of them are coming from a spot. And this was, right, when I started in account management, this was 6 years ago, but almost none of them had an outbound approach. It was all website, social, and then word of mouth referrals.
All right. I get where you're going. So I think it's because most people that start a business actually don't come from a sales background. I think that they have a good idea for a product or a service. A lot of people haven't done it before, and they're super concerned about, which is also important, having a product that maybe solves a problem or the right service or a good service. But they don't necessarily understand what they're getting into when they hang the shingle and start having a few customers. I just don't think they come from that background. It's crazy how predictable it can be, and people stay up at night thinking about the safety of their people and their business. But if you just simply drill into what your average client is, you know, what your close rate is and your retention rate of customers, and you do the math, you know, where I'm at now and where I want to grow, and you take those factors into play, you'll back up right into the number of new sales meetings that you have to have. And then you're either there or you're not, and you've got to do the work to figure out who's going to make sure that happens. But I think the biggest thing is people just don't come from that background, and they're not aware of what they need to do from a sales perspective, and they certainly don't think about. And I don't think there's enough content out there telling you how easy it could be, like how predictable predictable your business could be. That's why I truly feel like a predictable sales pipeline fixes every single problem, because then you at least have money coming in the door where you can afford to go hire people that know how to solve the problem, and that, you know, and then everything's easier.
I think that's 1,000% spot on. I'll give you another one. So if we define outbound as social, email, cold calling, just for the sake of this discussion, okay? Sure. Let me just give you a stat on cold calling, because here's why I think people don't go outbound as often as they should. High growth companies, defined as 20% year-over-year growth, are 2 times more likely to view cold calling as effective versus low growth or negative growth companies who were likely to view cold calling as, quote, dead or undecided. And I think that is another facet of answering your question of why people don't go outbound, because they think cold calling and they think cold calling is dead. Meanwhile, the high growth companies growing 20, 40, 60, 80, 100+% year over year, they know how wrong that is, and they're proving it out in the numbers, and they're thrilled that some of their competitors and lower negative growth companies are missing the boat, thinking that cold. I mean, how many, talk about content out there, Scott, to help you? I mean, how much content do you see out there on cold calling's dead?
Yeah, most of it.
Didn't
you put something out of that?
I retract.
Isn't that your message?
We're not talking about anything I've done in my past. So I know that. Not on this podcast.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. And I think part of the reason is, well, fast-growing companies, predictable sales solves all problems. They can invest more money in the right infrastructure to be able to do it right, or hire the right company. So I think some people try to do it themselves and they just don't do it the wrong way. And I think why, and we do this for a living, so we're lucky to see the inside of it, is there's two pipelines. And I don't think we talk enough about this. There's the pre-meeting pipeline and the post-meeting pipeline. And a lot of people are just managing how many deals do I need to close and how many opportunities do I have to close them. But then you need to back that up into how many meetings do I need to hold to get to X amount of opportunities. And then you need to back that up between how many appointments do I need to set, and then how many conversations do I need to have. And then on the other side, there's the pre-meeting pipeline where you're looking at it of like, I need to start with my target market. Who are the qualified companies that I'm going to go after? I need to identify the KDMs. I need to then have conversations with them. And then based on those conversations, I know my win rates for how many meetings I'm going to set. And I feel like if people were educated about, you got to manage this on two sides of the fence, I think people would be more successful with it.
I agree. Hey, let's be real too. I mean, a lot of people that are listening are thinking, especially maybe a older school manager, right? That just knows a certain way or came up a certain way, maybe like me. So maybe I should just say the way that I grew up, I had to make my own calls, and I'll really age myself and say that we had traveled to a market and I ripped the pages out of the yellow pages and came home and made phone calls.
What are the yellow pages?
Exactly.
I've never heard of this.
What are the yellow pages? But we're at a point where it's not happening. I mean, you're never going to get the activity, the prospecting activity that you want out of any salesperson. It just isn't going to happen. Also, a lot of the times, the person that's super good at setting meetings isn't always, the same person that's super good at having the sales conversation or contracting people, right? And so, there has been a split over the last few years, and now most salespeople expect that you'll be generating leads for them. And if somebody wants to do this internally and do it the right way, they got to know this inside and out, right? They got to know how to do it. And it takes multiple different types of individuals. And so I guess we're not talking about this being easy, but we are talking about if you can figure it out, you can solve almost every problem you have in business.
It's the right move.
I think I'm going to go so far as to say it's a hard and fast rule in today's day and age that your closers and your meeting setters are different people. I mean, I guess you could do it the other way, but why would you? Like, to Scott's point, if you have salespeople that have to set their own meetings, you're now competing to keep that talent with jobs where they won't. And that is, good luck.
Good luck with that.
Good luck with that. I mean, everybody at this table has gotten their own sales appointments. It takes an average of 10 touches these days to get a sales appointment. So now I'm thinking, okay, so now I've got these incredibly talented, high expectation, highly compensated salespeople, and I'm telling them to tell them they need 10 touches to get a sales appointment, and then they're going to go potentially close a deal. They're going to close fewer deals, make less money because they have to go make those touches, as opposed to, well, wait a minute, why don't I go over to a company down the street? They're going to set me 4 sales appointments a day, and I'm going to be able to close those, and my commission's going to be pretty much like. And then you overlay that with 40% of salespeople say getting meetings is the hardest part of their job. And so I think for those people out there, if you want an actionable takeaway up front, one thing is you got to separate setting meetings from closing deals. Those are different people.
I love that. And here's a stat for you. And I promise this podcast will not be about how great Abstract is. But if we have a point, I'm going to make it. We resisted this for a long time. And Scott can tell you because we spend a lot, as does everybody listening, on salespeople. So it was hard for us to understand why they couldn't generate their own meetings, especially because a lot of them were promoted from Abstract internally, where what did they do? They set meetings for our clients. However, COVID brought us an interesting opportunity. We had some extra staff. We didn't want to let anybody go. We made a commitment to keep everybody on board. and we made a decision to double down on our sales development. So that was the first time we actually expanded our sales development team to the point where it could sustain our sales goal from the sales development team. We always had partial appointments being set, but it was the first time we made that commitment. And you know what we've done since then? We haven't missed our monthly, not quarterly, not annual, our monthly sales goal by less than 85% since we made that team, since we made that decision. So like the whole point of like controlling your sales, you got to control the number of meetings you set, and you're not going to do it if it's not somebody's full-time job.
Yeah, I think about my past in the automotive industry, and we spent a lot of time training people on how to get their own meetings. But this just kind of backs up the separation of it. We'd spend 1 week setting up enough meetings where we could travel for 3 or 4 days and go see 6 or 8 dealers a day for that time period. And while we're out, of course, we weren't making calls, sending emails, generating leads. Then we come back to the office, do the same thing, travel back out, and you're just rotating through that. So half the time we weren't building a pipeline, and there was a lot of kind of filling the funnel back in. So salespeople can get to a point where they can generate their leads, but they're never going to be doing it all the time. So to me, you asked this before too about what a predictable sales pipeline means. Another thing that it means to me is there's a certain number of calls, emails, whatever it may be. There's activity that has to happen always, like it's always on, and it can't turn on and off. And you'll hear a lot of salespeople say, "Well, I gotta fill back up my funnel and
depleted my pipeline."
Yeah, and what we're saying, that's the problem. Like somebody should never say that I need to go rebuild my pipeline. That's the reason sales go up and down. That's the reason sales goals are missed. That's the reason growth goals are missed. And I guess what we're suggesting collectively is if you had pipeline activity that never turned off, then your salespeople could be focused on what they're doing, and the pipeline would be going, and you'd be in a better spot. Period.
It's, as leaders, we want our leaders to be managing leading indicators. Like, what are the leading indicators of success in different divisions of our business? There's no better leading indicator of business success in my mind than pipeline. And that is something our teams can 100% control. How many people are you putting at the top of the funnel? We can control that. We can manage to that. If you're out there and you're listening and you're thinking we're nuts, I promise you we're not. Tomorrow, if you start managing how many individual prospects go into the top of your funnel that your sales development or sales team, if you haven't separated, are going to call or email, you're going to call us back in 6 months and go, wow, this is the only thing I manage on the sales side and everything else takes care of itself, and it's magical.
I love that. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was just going to say, because I know it was our goal when shows are up that somebody would take a few things away. What are things that almost anybody could do right now to start getting closer to this?
First thing is have a sales goal, right? Like for this year, write it down, make it known. Everybody in the company is a sales rep. Build that mentality. Like as a company, we are getting to this goal. You write it down, you make it known. I think you're going to be more successful. Step 2 is look at where you're getting your sales currently and look at those 3 channels. Like what percentage are coming from referrals, what percentage are coming from inbound, and what percentage are coming from outbound, and fix the weaknesses in your process. Like plug the gaps. You can do it internally. I wouldn't suggest it. We could probably do a whole episode on that. You don't have to work with Abstract. You don't have to work with Sapper, but you have to be doing some sort of outbound approach, I feel like, to truly have a predictable sales pipeline. So I would start with making your sales goal known, knowing your numbers, and then plugging the gaps in your strategy. What do you think, Jeff?
First step is committing to outbound. The first step is in your head, in your boardroom, in your living room, wherever you're conducting the strategy discussions for your business, commit to outbound. and I'll give you a quick stat and then I'll move on just to drive this point home, okay? More than a third of sales appointments, and I'm talking about the difference between high growth companies and super high growth companies. Companies growing by 40% annually or 100%. So for those that are growing by 40% annually, on average, somewhere between 0 and a third of their appointments are coming from outbound. For companies that are growing by 100% or greater, median growth rate, more than a third of their appointments are coming from outbound. And so that's to say that companies that are growing at a super high rate are committed even more to outbound. Step 1, philosophically, commit to outbound. Step 2, separate your meeting getters from your closers. That shows the team that I can hold different people accountable to different segments of the business. And then last is get the right technology. You must, if you're going to run outbound well, you must have the right technology. You must have the right CRM. You must have the right sales engagement tool. You must have the right phone system. Otherwise, you're going to be spinning your wheels and competing with people who have that technology, which has now just become table stakes.
One hot take I would say is on we need to separate the appointment setters from the closers.
Yeah.
I would always keep the closers a little bit in the fire, maybe no more than an hour a day. But I think that gratitude for those appointments and the appreciation and the making the most out of every opportunity, having them do just a little bit of that, not much where it takes them off the path. I do think that, that may be controversial, but I think that's important.
So, we're saying make sure they have the technology to track, can't manage what you can't measure.
Mm-hmm.
Separate immediately, getting the meetings versus closing the meetings. Know your business development formula, and that includes the sales goal.
Sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm. You got to know where you're going, and then just like anything, even if you're trying to lose 20 pounds, when are you going to lose 20 pounds by, and how are you going to do it? And then you're doing the activities and things necessary on a daily basis to get to the ultimate weight.
Mm-hmm.
So this business development formula is super important. I think a big part of building the right predictable sales pipeline, I think it becomes more predictable if you've identified a target market or a niche that you serve best. I think it's easier to get more new meetings if you are specializing or niching down. I think that helps that become a little bit more doable. And then the last thing, if you don't come from a sales background, I think one of the most important things that you could do is go find a sales mentor right now. Right now.
I like that
so
a lot.
good. Yep.
Yeah.
Be okay with it. Like, look, we've been doing some classes internally here where we're getting people to think about running their teams or thinking about how they're running an individual business inside of these four walls. And some of the stats that we're going over, like the average entrepreneur makes $70,000. You can't effing tell me you started a business so that you could make 70 grand, right? The average entrepreneur actually spends 70 to 80 hours a week, not 40 to 50. 20% of them are gone in a year. Within 10 years, 70% of them are gone. And in the first couple of years, people usually don't get to pay themselves. Guess why? A sales pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we were to go pour through those businesses that are out of business, okay, there are some that maybe didn't have the right idea or the right service, but a lot of them, it was because they did have a good product or a good service and they didn't get it into the market, and they didn't get it in, maybe they did for a little bit, but then after year one or year two, when they sold everybody they knew and they needed to start getting into that unpredictable zone, they fucked up the sales pipeline and then they caused themselves a ton of problems and they're out of business. So go build a predictable sales pipeline.
And
right now,
what I think is important is there might be some people out there who aren't from a sales background and may be thinking, well, that's great if I have a pipeline, but I literally have no idea what to say to these people when I get out on these meetings. And I think what I would say is I've worked with a lot of clients in the same spot before, and you would be surprised how good you will get by having consistent meetings. Like, solve that problem first, go out there, make a fool out of yourself, be terrible, and we can do a session on that. And there's plenty of resources out there to have a good sales presentation. miss 100% of the shots you don't take, though, right? And a lot of times, if you do this in the right way, you just run into people that have the need. And you all provide incredible service, and you know how to talk about what you do. And that would be a good episode. Something we could talk about more, how to make the most out of your sales pitches.
So what are the 5 things?
5 things what?
That someone needs to do immediately.
The 5 things someone needs to do immediately. Can I ask a question before I go there? I have a question. I have literally a question. I've been
You are allowed. You are allowed to
I have
ask a question.
No, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Are questions allowed in podcasts?
We're making our own rules.
This is our
second
and final episode.
After you drop the F-bomb, I think all the rules are out the window.
Yeah,
I thought you were supposed to drop a couple of those.
Yeah, listen, FCC's outside, so we'll. Thank you, everybody. So you've got. I think we'd all agree that ideally you're running inbound, you're running outbound. Like in an ideal state, you're doing both. Like you're doing SEO, you're probably doing some paid. You got your website humming. You're doing outbound. You're doing all that stuff. But there's probably people out there, business owners especially, who have a defined amount of money and they can kind of choose one or the other. I guess I'm curious from you guys. Where would you counsel them to spend that amount of money that they have? If it's limited up front, or like, what are the rules of thumb for like, you guys should definitely spend it on inbound versus you should go outbound?
Scott will have a better answer to this, so I'll say my bad answer first, and then he can go.
That's how you know it's going to be good.
The first thing I would say is really challenge yourself on, do you have a limited amount of money? Because we just talked about it's the number one problem to solve. So if you have 7 people in your service department, and you could maybe get away with 6 and spend more on your sales, I'd up my budget and I'd do a combination of all 3. I think if you don't have a website, it is very tough to be competitive in this day and age. So if you don't have a website, a substantial one, I would spend some money there. But the best form of marketing, in my opinion, and I'm super biased, is picking up the phone and having a conversation with a person. Like that is the dollars I would be spending. What do you think, Scott? Did you approve? Do you approve of that?
Of course I do. I've been through this, so I tell you exactly what I would do first. I would go build out all the necessary collateral that makes it easy for myself and my team to say, here's what we do, here's the problems we solve, here's why we're different. It's always been a big deal for me to go build the sales decks, the sell sheets, the case studies, the website, the video, before I even get to calling on people, right? Because that's going to make me more impactful when I am going on those new sales meetings. I build out the collateral to look much larger than I am when I start, right?
Yeah.
Like, wow, this is a big company that I'm talking to, when you're like out of your basement, right? Wondering how you're going to pay your bills. But I build all those things. You have to tell people the problems you solve, and then I said it before. If you don't niche down, then I think you're too broad, and I think it's too hard to get there. What problems do you solve, and for whom, and why are you different than the other guys? Make it obvious. Then you can start going on your new sales meetings and being more impactful. Those are the first dollars I spend before I even get to it.
So should we agree on a 5? I think we talked about it, like the 5 things. So let me give my take and see if you guys agree. So first one, I would say establish a sales goal and let it be known. Like everybody, your whole team, leadership team needs to get behind it, needs to believe that it's possible, right? And then I would say step 2 is the strategy that you're going to get there, which is your business development formula. What are your streams of revenue? How many opportunities, how many calls, how many appointments do you need to get down to the deals that you need to close? Step 3, you got to have outbound. And with outbound, you got to separate the closers from the appointment setters. Step 4, it's something you just said, but I think it's important, is know the message that you're taking to market. And do you have the supporting materials to take it there? Like, what's the problem you're solving? Who are you going after? And then how is that message getting out there? And then step 5, get a sales mentor, get a consultant, get somebody that you feel like, a buddy that has done it, talk to a business who's in a different spot. You'd be surprised how many competitors will actually pick up the phone and talk to you and have an honest conversation. We feel like that's a good 5.
Yeah, I think that immediately that gets you in a spot where you're going to be more successful. Ultimately, though, you need to do it at a big level.
Commit
right?
to it, right?
So either you come from a sales background and you're going to be able to build some of this internally, right? And we'll help you do that, or you hire outside. But this is super hard to do. So we're going to make it so those 5 make it better than it is today, but that they don't solve the entire problem.
Definitely not. And let me look for those CEOs, business owners who have a sales background, you're going to be selling. Like, resist the urge to hire a VP of sales or a seller too early. I think the rule of thumb is to sell till you get to $1 million in revenue. Like, don't shortchange yourself. And for those that aren't, challenge yourself. And I think Eric alluded to this earlier. Challenge yourself to be at least in the sales conversations until you get to $1 million in revenue. Because what you're going to learn from those sales conversations is going to be enormously valuable as you seek to build out a better product that customers want, as you seek to figure out the allocation of cost for your marketing mix. Like, you got to be in the game. Like, being on the sidelines, not being in sales previously is no excuse to be on the sidelines, especially in the early days, in my opinion.
I love that you say get in the game, right? There's nobody that probably is as passionate about your product or service as you are. In fact, I took a sales test once with an outside consultant, and I had been doing really well with sales, so I was kind of a little hurt. But I flunked the sales test that we were going to give to our salespeople. But, she had a pretty good answer to that, and that was, well, the product inside and out. You couldn't be more passionate about it, and because of that, you're selling a lot of it. But you don't have the natural characteristics to be a good salesperson. And that just kind of made sense to me. I think some people, because they think they're not a salesperson, don't put themselves in sales situations, but they don't realize they'd probably be the best person to be in the sales situation.
All of our best salespeople, I don't think any of them thought they were going into sales when they started. They really didn't. So it's surprising, get in there and mix it up.
So sales pipeline.
Predictable sales pipeline, baby. Eat, sleep, and breathe.
Place.
Yeah.
I think, as always, if you have any questions, hit the link below and reach out to us. And in the second episode, what are we going to be talking about, Jeff?
In the second episode, we're going to be talking about how to conduct one-on-ones throughout your organization that will ensure alignment and help you grow amazing leaders faster than you ever could. I can't wait, because it's very selfishly, this is something that I've come into this organization and learned and just like jumped right in on. And the impact is ridiculous. And I just have such a great firsthand account of how much these, what we call MAP meetings, can change a business. I'm stoked for it.
I am very excited about that. That might actually be the only thing that I am qualified to talk about. So I can't wait for next week.
Yeah, looking forward to that conversation. As always, thanks for listening. Reach out if you need any help, and happy selling.
Always be growing.
Yeah, always be growing.
Always be growing.
Thanks for listening to The Grow Show. Leave us a review and let us know how we're doing, or if there's a topic you'd like us to cover in the future.
The Grow Show is sponsored by Abstract Marketing Group, whose outsourced sales and marketing services provide you with everything you need to close consistent business for less than the cost of a full-time employee. Sapper Consulting. Let us schedule your sales appointments so you don't have to. Abstract Cloud Solutions. Leveraging the power of the Salesforce platform to solve complex business problems with straightforward solutions.